Hello everyone and welcome to the Waynesburg Effect. I'm Ryan Schwertfeger here alongside fellow panelist Paige Carter and new panel member Sean Mead. Now if you haven't watched the show before, each panelist will bring up a current event topic that has an effect on the nation, the community, or even us as college students. Each panelist will get an opportunity to give their opinion on the issue at hand, and we may even engage on a friendly debate on the topic. Now, while all of us have our own opinions, we do our best to make sure that what we say is backed up with facts so that you, the viewer, can not only be more informed, but also capable to form your own opinions on how the topic we discuss affects you, your family, and your friends. This is the Waynesburg Effect. Welcome back to the Waynesburg Effect. As I said in the opening, we would like to welcome our new panelist, Mr. Sean Mead. And we'll hear from Mr. Mead with his topic of discussion a little bit later in the show, so we can all look forward to that. But to start us off today with our first topic, here's Paige Carter.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's highly anticipated speech to Congress is over, but the debate on Iran's nuclear capabilities rages on. The Prime Minister wrapped up his comments and quickly became the subject of criticism of many in Washington, including the White House. We have footage from CNN as to what this controversy between the U.S. and Israel means as we head on in this debate.
A few empty seats in the audience as Israel's leader took Washington's most prominent stage outside the White House. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke to Congress, making a sharp case against a deal still in the works to limit Iran's nuclear ambitions.
I feel a profound obligation to speak to you about an issue that could well threaten the survival of my country and the future of my people: Iran's quest for nuclear weapons.
More than 50 lawmakers choosing not to show up for the speech. Others simply called it political theater, with it taking place just 2 weeks shy of Israel's election.
The Prime Minister didn't offer any viable alternatives.
President Obama firing back at his critics who say negotiating with Iran is not the answer.
Let's wait until there's actually a deal on the table that Iran has agreed to, at which point everybody can evaluate it. We don't have to speculate.
Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi said she was near tears during the speech. She called it an insult to the intelligence of the U.S.
I went, I listened, I was disappointed.
But some Republicans are standing their ground on today's hosting of Netanyahu, many of them eager to thwart President Obama's diplomatic efforts.
We should be focused on the issue of Iran's attempt to obtain a nuclear weapon. And an honest discussion about that subject was frankly advanced by hearing from the Prime Minister of Israel.
The administration continues making its case, with a deadline to reach an agreement fast approaching.
Very clear that Netanyahu openly sided with President Barack Obama's Republican critics, and this sparked an outrage between the White House and Israel. As we head into more controversy than we've seen with Israel as America in years to come, questions are arising from this and many other actions that Israel has done. And Ryan, as we see what happened, and I'm sure you're aware, but Speaker of the House John Boehner organized this without direct consent from the White House. And I want to ask, was this an act of diplomacy? I mean, as an American public, we deserve to know what is happening, and we deserve to see the relations with Israel span out. But do you think this was conducted in the correct way?
I think if you look at it compared to what's always been done in the past, it is right for the Speaker of the House to let the President know that they're having a special guest come in, because usually it's the President who has the special guest who's coming in, and they just want to speak to Congress.
But the President didn't even come to this speech.
Correct. And that's why I think that Speaker Boehner did not consult with President Obama, because he knew that President Obama would probably not really like to see Benjamin Netanyahu. I think they sort of respect each other as leaders of different nations. However, I think we've seen in the past that they don't always get along together. You know, there's been comments that aides have made about that finally he's left the White House, so he's not here anymore. President Obama hasn't really been working well together with Benjamin Netanyahu with this whole deal with Iran that could be in the works. You know, nothing certain yet. But that was the whole point of inviting Benjamin Netanyahu to come speak. is he wanted to warn everyone in Congress that they should be wary of any possible agreement between the United States and Iran.
But I understand what you're saying, but President Obama did not attend this. President Obama wanted to respect the Israeli elections, and for the Prime Minister to come knowing President Obama wanted to wait and still came, it seems to me that President Obama has the right almost to translate this as a direct rebellion against what his wishes, and with all that history they have in the past, I think it's even more significant. But Sean, what do you think? Do you think that the reaction that President Obama had was warranted, or do you think that he should have attended even in spite of his obvious problems with it?
I see he was avoiding the whole time period with what was going on. He said the Israeli elections were going on at the time, and he wanted to avoid any sort of media that might have come out of that. But I feel like he should have been there to attend, at least just to make his appearance known, make sure people realize that, hey, he cares about what's going on. At least just show his face. It's always nice to say you've been there as opposed to not being there.
The White House said it would be as if the Democrats in Congress invited the French president to speak after opposing President George W. Bush's invasion of Iraq. Is that a fair comparison? And I mean, what do you think about what the White House had to say?
It's being compared on different scales and whatnot, but just going back, he should have at least shown up. Yeah.
I'm not sure I agree. I honestly think that the Speaker of the House should be taking much of the blame for this. I mean, I do think that it was necessary for the Prime Minister to come. A lot is going on with ISIS right now, and it is a global and international issue that I think we all need to be addressing. But I think that history shows the smallest things can just create this domino effect of actions.
This is true. I can see where you're coming from with that. So
I just don't want something crazy to happen because of our leaders.
Yes.
If anything, we need to be joining forces and respecting each other to combat the tragedy that's awaiting us. And I just don't think that needs to happen internally.
But I think that was a reason to invite him, because President Obama did not want to invite him because he wants to go his own way and try and forge this deal, this possible deal with Iran. By getting someone from that opposite viewpoint, which I think for many Americans is the majority viewpoint, a lot of people will stand with Israel. And even they said, 4 dozen Democrats did skip the speech, but they said there was not an empty seat anywhere in the Capitol building.
Well, then
so
maybe
it's not that there was this huge walkout. People want to come, they want to support Israel, they want to hear what the Prime Minister has to say. And I think it's important, if we're going to continue these important Israeli-United States relations, which we've had with them since Israel was founded, I think even though you might disagree, it is important to get that other point of view going on and invite the Prime Minister.
But don't you think that America should be a front that is united? Because it seems to me like what you're saying between the lines is that this was a bipartisan problem. Because we as a government and we as the Republicans and Democrats weren't in agreement about this. And that's where all of the confusion started. And it was kind of unfair for the Prime Minister to have to deal with those repercussions, but I see the Republican Party not respecting the Democratic Party, and moreover, the President. And even if the President's wishes were unneeded and just ridiculous, I can still see how he feels disrespected, but I do agree with you that we need to be hearing about these Israeli relations, but I think that we need to be on the same page. So I think if anything we can all agree on is just that we as the federal government and as Senate and Congress need to be more united on this.
Well, to combat what you just said about the whole rift, I mean, Benjamin Netanyahu said that relations with Israel is a bipartisan issue. So both Republicans and Democrats should have gone. They should have been there. And even one of the minority whip, Senator Dick Durbin, he said he decided not. He was debating on the fence whether he should attend, but he said, "quote I chose to attend out of respect for Israel and the wishes of a personal friend." And I think that's the way that a lot of these senators and people should have looked at it, in saying, maybe I disagreed with how it was conducted and how it was organized, but because we have these close relations with Israel, it's so important that we go at least hear what he has to say.
I can see where you're coming from. I mean, it's a very complex happening. We don't see much of this in politics, so I think it's important to dissect and just discuss, even if we don't necessarily see eye to eye. But I think you guys brought up some really valid points, and we'll see what happens with Israel, and I just hope that some sort of Iran policy can be enacted from this.
Coming up after the break, we're going to discuss the CPAC conference and possible 2016 Republican presidential candidates. We'll be right back.
Wow, these are really good.
You act surprised. Practice makes perfect.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who don't need perfection. They need you.
In about 11 months from now, the Iowa caucuses will occur, the first matchup to determine who will be the nominees for the President of the United States. And in about 600 days from today, those nominees will face off to determine who will become the next President of the United States. Whether you think the elections are right around the corner or they're still quite a ways away in the future, some would argue that the Republican race for president has just begun after the conclusion of CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference. Now, many potential presidential candidates, as well as highly recognized figures in Republican circles, were in attendance to inform and persuade the audience, many of whom are the activists and who campaign and politicians need in order to be successful in an election. Now, while there have been no major announcements to date of any known figure running for the presidency, many pundits do see CPAC as an indicator as to who may and may not run, in addition to which candidate or candidates the important activists and volunteers will support. So, just to set off what we have so far, so no official candidate has declared, although both Jeb Bush and Ben Carson have created exploratory committees. So a lot of people say that there's a chance that they may run, or a really good chance they will run, but there has not been any official announcement yet that either of them will run. So Paige, you said that you saw a little bit of the conference. I just wanted to ask, was there anyone who made an impression on you? And was there anything that you saw, maybe a candidate, and had a specific impression upon the audience who was there?
I think that Rand Paul, in contrast with Jeb Bush, really had some positive feedback. I think that the audience really received him well. They saw him as a genuine candidate rather than a politician, and I think that the Republican Party desperately needs people like that. Negative impressions, Donald Trump. I just felt like he was speaking from no place of knowledge and no place of intellect, and once again, he goes on this rant about how he doesn't think Barack Obama was born in the United States. And I saw that as a continual theme of this whole conference, just the same issues from sometimes 2 years ago being brought up. The Libya scandal, President Obama's citizenship. These things were just constantly being brought up, and it almost makes me think, is this party just stuck in what's happened and these points that they think make them look stronger, or are they really keeping up with current day issues? I mean, there was a lot of discussion about immigration policy and foreign policy, but even then, it just seemed like a lot of pointing fingers at President Obama and the administration on this entire thing going on with ISIS.
Well, do you think that stems in part that Hillary Clinton is going to be the likely Democratic nominee, and so they want to bring up all of these things that have happened over the course of the Obama administration and things related to Hillary Clinton, like the Benghazi
I
attack?
think so. I do. But I also know that Hillary Clinton has done a lot worse than, not a lot worse, I'm saying she does consistently things that I don't agree with. But those aren't being talked about. And I think as a politician and someone on a platform to speak, they should be, they should be banking on that as well. I think that her policy isn't strong. I think that she is doing this a lot for political reasons and maybe just to keep the name in the system of government. But those aren't being discussed, and it just seems like she's known for this Benghazi act, which was horrible. But why can't we supplement that with other things? And why can't we get down to who she would be as a president? Because that's what needs to be discussed, why people should not be president, why people should be president, not one wrongful act. You see what I'm saying? It just seems very inductive.
I mean, but they're also having to play to the crowd. I mean, the people there who are, as we said in the opening, are the conservative activists. That's the kind of stuff they want to hear. And I'm actually interested now to turn it over to Mr. Mead. You have more of a libertarian, lean Democratic side. So I was curious to hear what your kind of point of view was as someone who probably would not have attended this conference, from reading about it, listening to a few of the speeches. What kind of impression do you think, what did CPAC give to you?
If I had the invitation to go, I most likely would have went, to be honest. I like seeing things from other people's points of views. It gives me either reasons to back up my beliefs or see where they're coming from with their own. One of the things I was reading here, Jeb Bush, he was booed as he came on the stage and heckled during his 25-minute speech, 25-minute appearance. I don't know how necessarily professional that would have been for me to sit there in the audience and see that happening. I mean, if somebody comes to speak or talk about anything, they should be pretty professional and a respectful audience.
So did you hear any candidate that you think, as a libertarian-leaning Democrat person, that you listened to and thought, maybe I would vote for them or I would consider them, or if it's in the conservative and Republican Party's best interest, I think they should nominate person X?
Well, even like Rand Paul, his name's been on the Republican side for a while now. You always hear about him in the news and stuff like that. I'd like to actually see a fresh face in their seat, see some new people step up.
What do you think about Ben Carson?
I'm unfamiliar with Ben Carson, to be honest.
He's a doctor, very well renowned.
African-American neurosurgeon.
Yeah, neurosurgeon, and he has been a conservative voice, and he's very well known in the commentating community of conservatism. But he, like Ryan mentioned, is just formed a committee to explore his options if he were to run for president. And I definitely think that is the definition of a fresh face, because he knows. I think the difference between Ben Carson and Donald Trump is Ben Carson has been a political commentator, and he does know the arena. He knows how it works. Do you agree?
I would agree to some extent. I mean, he has been involved in politics very little over the last few years. I mean, he's done a few little things on the side, but he rose to prominence.
In comparison to Donald Trump, though?
Correct.
What do you think of him?
But if you think about, to go off of what you were talking about in our last segment, he rose to prominence at the prayer breakfast, in which he pretty much, with President Obama sitting less than 20 feet away from him, said a few things about the administration that weren't too keen.
But they were respectful. That he did it in a very respectful fashion.
So that's what you consider being the difference. So like saying that with the president almost being right there, that's a bit more respectful than not inviting the prime minister. Is that kind of what you see, that fine line there?
I think that Ben Carson said what he thought in a professional way. He did not necessarily bash the presidents, but he spoke to the notion of political correctness, correct?
I believe that was part of it.
Yeah. So I think that it was more of him just showing the public what this theory has done to society. And it was very important, and Barack Obama sat there very respectfully and was at points nodding his head. So I think that speaks to the gravitas that Ben Carson possessed in that.
Well, we're going to have to see if any of these people are going to be official candidates. I mean, the top three vote getters was Rand Paul, Scott Walker, and Ted Cruz. Ben Carson came in fourth, and Jeb Bush came in fifth. So we're going to have to see if any of these other people declare they're running for president, but getting those conservative activists are going to be very key. So coming up next, we're going to discuss a new discovery about Hillary Clinton, as well as her possible presidential run. We'll be right back.
I think someone at my friend's school has this thing called autism. My friend's brother's son has autism. My neighbor's son has autism. My son has autism.
Autism is getting closer to home. Today, 1 in 68 children is diagnosed with autism. That's about a 30% increase in 2 years. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs.
Welcome back to the Waynesburg Effect. Hillary Clinton, a possible candidate for the Democratic Party in the 2016 presidential election, is facing backlash, according to sources. Hillary Clinton did not have a government email address during her 4-year tenure at the State Department. Her aides took no action to have her personal emails preserved on department servers at the time, as required by the Federal Records Act. The Times says Clinton conducted all of her official business not with a government email address, but with a private one. Aside from potential security concerns, this is a problem because official correspondence is supposed to be preserved for the historic record as set with the Federal Records Act. Now, Ryan, with you, how big of a concern do you think this is? She's not the first person to use a personal email address like that in a position of power similar to her. John Kerry, Secretary John Kerry, was the first to have an established government email in that position. Do you feel that since she's using this private one, which she made back in 2009, do you think possibly she's hiding anything?
Well, I mean, earlier on, an earlier breaking story that happened not too long ago, there was something that came out about work that she did with the Clinton's Foundation, which I believe is called the Clinton Global Institute, if I'm not mistaken. And there's some things that they were talking with dignitaries from other countries while she was Secretary of State, and that could have been something going on behind the scenes there. So I think that maybe that feeds into this a little bit. I know the reason why they found out about this, the private email, is because they were actually investigating the attack on Benghazi, and when they were looking through all the correspondence, they noticed that it was between her and her aides, email conversations was going through this private email. I have quite a personal issue that this server that she was using was from her house. I know it's protected because there's Secret Service protection there, but the fact that it's not a government-run email and that these records, that she could be holding back something, she apparently says that she's giving everything up. But I think even so, regardless of the party, I mean, we saw this with Chris Christie with Bridgegate in terms of everything going on there, in terms of that they used a private email, they used texting. So I think we need to maybe see if we should update the law and make sure that officials are working with the law and following the law.
Now, do you feel, to add on that this is getting so much media attention because it's Hillary Clinton? Like Paige mentioned earlier, possible candidate for 2016 on the Democratic side of things. And even with the incidents with Bill Clinton, do you think that may have an effect on why this is getting so much media
Well, I
attention?
think a lot of people say that Hillary Clinton is kind of the heir apparent, that she's probably going to be the one who's going to announce, and she's going to be the nominee for the Democrats for the president in 2016. So, of course, this is a big issue. And even if she wasn't running, the Clintons are such a huge, prominent family in politics today that I think this would have been a bigger story anyway. But I actually have to say that I was quite surprised that of all the media entities that broke this story, it was the New York Times, who usually lean a bit more on the liberal side. So part of me thinks maybe this is something to be proud of, that they didn't kind of use any biases they had and publish the story. On the other hand, I'm also kind of being a little skeptical and saying, why is this coming out now? Is this just to get this out of the way before the election starts running?
I can see that. Now, Paige, question for you. Nobody stepped up during her tenure to admit or say anything about her not using a public or a government-issued email address. Why do you think that happened?
I have absolutely no idea, because Hillary rightfully, or willingly more like, handed over 55,000 of these emails, which means that there's potentially more that she didn't hand over, which means that she was actively using this email.
Yeah.
And I just don't see how there wasn't one person within her department who had any ethical or moral compass that they didn't bring this up. I mean, it's almost scary how she did this for 4 years.
You would have thought somebody would have stepped up.
It says a lot. It says a lot about how sly people can be. But I really want, and I hope that Hillary makes an informed statement or official statement regarding this, because I think that she is just setting herself up for failure heading into the next presidential election. I mean, Benghazi was right on her tail when she ran the last time, and I think this and other situations could surmount to the same kind of effect. And I think this is the kind of stuff Republicans need to be focusing on, current issues in conjunction with past issues.
Ryan, do you think this will affect her presidential campaign in 2016?
I think it will. The media is actually shockingly covering it, which I think is good. All politicians should be held to a high standard in the media's eyes. However, the thing that still remains to be seen is whether this becomes a lasting issue, and also, do most Americans care? I think a lot of people, if you were to describe it to them and explain why it's such an important faux pas that this email account was secret, I think some people might have not been too happy about it, or they would have been a little skeptical. But if most people don't know about it or don't understand why it's important, then I think that's going to be an issue coming down the line. Now, coming up next, we're going to conclude with our final speed round, so stay tuned for that.
A boy born in Joplin, Missouri was fascinated by anything with wheels and a motor. The odds of him going on to fascinate millions with his talent? 1 in 260,000. The odds of this born racer having 157 career top 10 finishes in NASCAR? 1 in 125 billion. The odds of him winning both the Daytona 500 and the Brickyard 400 in the same year? 1 in 195 million. The odds of a child being diagnosed with autism? 1 in 68. I'm NASCAR driver Jamie McMurray, and my niece has autism. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs.
For our final segment, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're each going to discuss something that caught our eye in the news this week for a final speed round. So one of the videos that I found, a man in New Jersey, obviously they've been getting a lot of snow on the East Coast, he built a luge track in his backyard. If you remember the luge from the Olympics where you kind of slide down. I just wanted to ask, do you think that would be something that you would do yourself? Would you build that if you had kids for your kid, Paige?
I don't know if I would have the time.
You would have the time? But if you did have the time, do you think that would be kind of cool to do?
I think it's very creative, and I think it's a good family building exercise.
Sean, what about you? What do you got?
I definitely build one. I mean, just seeing the Olympic guys and how fast they go down, really cool. So.
Yeah, I love all the kind of things, the luge, skeleton, all that kind of stuff. I believe, Mr. Mead, you have the next one.
So, continue with our Clinton stuff. It was recently released this past week that the painting of Bill Clinton, there was a painting made by Nelson Shanks, and there's a shadow in the background of it, and that shadow is supposed to represent the shadiness of his office terms. Paige, how do you feel about that?
I think all art is political, and if it wasn't, and if artists weren't trying to be political, they would make shoes. So I think that it speaks very highly of the whole profession of what art is supposed to be.
Very good. What about you, Ryan?
I find it a little slightly amusing. I'm not sure if this paintist has done this kind of stuff before with other politicians. I think if you did it with others, that would be fair. Then he gets a little bit of dig out of everybody. However, if he just did that at Bill Clinton, well, I certainly find that amusing. Yeah. I'm not sure if that's entirely fair, especially since it's a nice portrait.
I know when the painting first came out, the main debate with it was he wasn't wearing his wedding ring in the picture, but now there's more drama on it. And Paige, last but not least.
The Washington Post released an article this week that officially pronounces coffee as being a healthful habit, which I'm very excited about. But the nation's top panel met, and they decided that drinking 3 to 5 cups of coffee a day, which is my average on the low side, can help reduce cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. So, what do you think, Ryan?
I don't drink coffee. I don't plan on drinking coffee. I think all these studies sometimes can be very bogus.
The nation's top panel.
I know, but the nation's top panel also has said in the past that smoking was good for you, and we'll see where that turned out.
So I think
well, things in the past, people thought smoking used to be good for you. Now all of a sudden, then it's not. So I think we always have to be really wary of all these types of studies. They change all the time. Next thing you know, in 2 weeks from now, it'll be that coffee is deadly for your health. So I think we have to keep all of this with a grain of salt.
I mean, with me, I gave up soda for Lent, so I've been drinking copious amounts of coffee to stay awake. I drink it black because I'm too lazy to make it taste good. So I'll roll with it.
Coffee black tastes good, just for the record.
It's not too bad. So.
All right, well, thank you, everyone, for joining us today on the Waynesburg Effect. I'm Ryan Schwertfeger. We'll see you next time.